Hey guys, it's Brandon, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, I post true crime content like this every week, except for the past month, but we're going to get back into the flow. So if that's something you're interested in, please subscribe, leave a like and put on this notification bell so you know when I upload a new video. So today we're going to be covering the case of Jill Dando. So let's get into the case. Jill Dando was a newsreader and TV presenter and was 37 years old at the time of her murder. On April 26, 1999, she was shot in the head outside of her home in Fulham, London. The morning of April 26th, she was staying with her fiance Alan Farthing in Chiswick. Jill decided to go home that morning. Now, she didn't usually visit her home that often, and she was in the process of selling it. She arrived at her house at around 11:30 AM and was unlocking her door when she was grabbed from behind. The attacker then used their right arm to force her to the ground, and her face was pressed against the floor. The attacker then shot Jill in the left temple with a 9mm automatic pistol, which killed her instantly. 15 minutes after the killing, Jill's neighbour Helen Noble found her body and called the police at 11:47 AM. Jill's body was then taken to Charing Cross Hospital, where she was pronounced dead on arrival at 1:03 PM. Richard Hughes, another neighbour of Jill Dando, claimed he heard Jill exclaim as if she had seen an old friend and that he did not hear a gunshot. He also says he saw a man who he now believes was the killer, but at the time he was unaware of the murder. He says the man was around 6 foot tall and was a middle-aged white man. With Jill being huge in the public eye and everyone knowing who she was, however, police received no leads, even though they had spoken to around 2,500 people and taken 1,000 statements in the first 6 months after the murder. Jill would have been in contact with lots of people. There were just too many places for the police to look, as millions of people knew who she was, which made the case a lot more difficult. He also thought of the possibility that because she hosted Crime Watch, which helped solve cases, that someone had a grudge against Jill and that's why they killed her. After a year of investigation, the police had nothing and began to focus on a man named Barry George because he lived in the area of Fulham and had a history of sexually harassing and assaulting women. It's believed that the police only focused on Barry George because he was deemed an easy target. He had an IQ below average at 75. He also had epilepsy and he was described as being slow. The police described him as eyebrows meet, teeth broken, talks with a lisp, simple. He was a vulnerable person who could be easily trapped and could incriminate themselves easily. Police used an attractive female officer to honey trap Barry, even though in 1992 honey trapping was discredited in a case. If you don't know what honey trapping is, it's when an attractive person is used to gather information from an individual or to get them to do something unwise or that incriminates themselves. The cover name of this officer is Sonia, and Sonia and Barry had an hour-long conversation where he admitted to her that he was being looked into for the murder of Jill Dando. He also told her that he was in trouble and that the police had searched his house and torn it all apart just because he lived in the area of Fulham. He told the officer that he had been trying to help the police by giving information on a car he had seen surveying around in the area days prior to the murder. This honey trap didn't really gain any leads for the police, but it helped the police to gather information that Barry was antisocial, a loner and attention-seeking, which they could use later in court in front of a jury. On the 25th of May he was arrested, and then on the 28th he was charged with murder. At At his trial, his defence argued that the murder was very well planned and that Barry George was simply not smart enough to plan and carry out such a well-planned attack. July 2nd, 2001, Barry George was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of Jill Dando. Barry and his legal team had unsuccessfully tried to appeal his conviction, but on the third time they were successful. In November 2007, a retrial was approved because the smallest amount of gunpowder residue found in Barry's trouser pocket was discredited. His second trial took 8 weeks to complete, and on the 1st of August 2008, Barry George was acquitted of the murder. So now we're going to get onto some theories of who killed Jill Dando, because it's pretty obvious to me that Barry George did not commit the murder. The first theory is that Jill was murdered by a professional hitman. This is possible because she was killed with one bullet to the head in broad daylight, and there was no witnesses of the murder, and nobody had heard a gunshot, and not a trace of DNA was left behind at the crime scene. For a murder, this was done very well and was carried out very professionally, so that's why it's often believed there was a professional hitman that killed Jill. One of two men from the UK's most notorious crime families is believed to have killed Jill. This is possible because she presented Crime Watch on the BBC, and like I said before, some may have held a vendetta against Jill for that. An anonymous hitman had contacted journalist and former police officer Thomas Williams and told him that they know who committed the murder and that it was definitely committed by a hitman. Now, he didn't give the name of this hitman because he claims he's fearful that this other hitman may try and take his life. The ex-boss of the flying squad also believes that this was a professional murder. The flying squad, if you don't know, was a branch off of the police, and they were just able to get to crime scenes quicker than regular police. Boss John O'Connor believes that this was a state-sponsored murder. He claims that he had an excellent lead and that the police had just ignored him as they were so focused on Barry George. John says that state-sponsored murders are very notorious and very difficult to prove because the killer is highly trained in assassinations. The next theory is that the murder was carried out by the Serbian mafia. It's because detectives received a tip that Serbian mobsters were talking about Jill's assassination inside of a bar. Claimed they wanted to carry out this murder because Jill had reported on a NATO-led bombing of a Serbian TV station. The reports of these men say that one of the Serbian mobsters was a tall man with a swallow tattoo on his neck. The BBC also received threats 3 days later threatening Anne Robinson and Alice Beer. These women had both featured in the show Watchdogs, and this threat said that they were going to kill Anne and Alice and 2 other people. The police were able to track this call to Buckinghamshire, but were unable to trace the caller or an exact location. 3 weeks before Jill's murder, Jill had fronted a TV appeal on Albanian and Kosovan refugees, which had angered the Serbian mafia. 4 Serbians were also on trial for a very similar murder at the time. I'm going to try to pronounce his name, or I'll just put it on screen. Slavko Korov, it's on screen, was a critic of the Serbian regime, and he was also a journalist. He was also killed at close range outside of his home just 15 days before Jill's murder. Murder was an IRA revenge murder. Barry George's legal team had files that a convicted killer named Wayne Ed wrote a letter from his prison cell confessing that he was part of a 4-man hit squad and that they committed the murder of Jill Dando. The letter was sent from Wakefield Prison, and he was incarcerated for a murder just 2 months after Jill's. He claims that a man from his hit squad killed Jill with the 9mm automatic pistol and then escaped to a safe house in a Land Rover. He claims the only reason he's confessing to the murder is because he doesn't want Barry George being part of an establishment cover-up. She was targeted for her links to the police due to her presenting Crime Watch. Police never looked into the letters, even though they were fully aware of them. Now they say that they were able to get away with the murder because they wanted to keep the Northern Ireland peace process undisturbed, which also makes sense to why the police would ignore the letter as not to disturb this peace process. The next theory is that Jill was killed for attempting to expose a paedophile ring. In 2014, a colleague of Jill's stated that Jill had raised her concerns surrounding allegations that she had heard to the bosses of the BBC. There were allegations of a paedophile ring in the organisation, and Jill had sent a file to senior management in 1990, but no action was taken. Jill had told this colleague that women had been complaining to her of sexual assault and harassment in the workplace. The allegations were made against well-known figures, which is why people were deciding to just ignore the allegations to not ruin their reputations or lose their jobs, which a bit stupid, innit? And now the last theory I found, which I personally don't believe at all, but I'm gonna add it anyway, and then you can tell me how you feel about it in the comments. And this theory is that a crazed stalker had killed Jill. The week of her murder, Jill had been on the cover of Radio Times magazines. This cover was deemed provocative, but I'll put it on the screen. And to me, that is not provocative at all. It's crazy how times changed. Now, this provocative photo may have made this crazed fan want to kill Jill. To me, this murder seems way too professional for it to be a crazy stalker fan, and no DNA was left at the scene, so I personally don't believe this theory, but all the theories I've included except the last one seem plausible to me, so let me know in the comments which theory you believe, or if you have any more theories, leave them down below. If you've enjoyed this case, leave a thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you in my next case. Oh, I also have a podcast on Spotify. It's only available on Spotify right now, so that's on screen. So go stream that, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.